little bit of a character. It's not the way that we normally view hospitals. It's viewed in a positive way because for a lot of people that have cystic fibrosis and other.
We partnered with our friends at No More because I knew I could only direct this film if I had experienced women standing behind me, women who truly understood this space. From the very beginning, our goal was to tell an honest, grounded story that reflects the reality millions of people face every day. More than anything, I hope audiences walk away knowing they have the power to break cycles they never chose in the first place. But in today's world, truth struggles to keep up with lies. Lies spread quickly, faster than facts ever can. They move through social media in 30-second reels and short tic-tacs repeated and reshared until they start to feel real. Stories get twisted. Claims about what happened on a film set. Accusations of smear campaigns. Dramatic narratives about what someone endured. Once those stories reach mainstream media, they can shape public perception long before the truth has a chance to surface. And even when it does, some people refuse to accept it because the first version they heard felt more compelling. In highly competitive industries like Hollywood, ego and ambition often amplify these conflicts. Success requires confidence and self-belief. But living in an environment that constantly reinforces praise can also create entitlement. When things unravel, it can be tempting for people to protect their image at any costs, binning narratives, selectively sharing information, or using legal and PR strategies to influence public opinion. Media outlets can end up presenting partial accounts that shape a storyline before all the facts are examined. At the center of it all are real people whose reputations and identities are impacted. Public scrutiny, leaked messages, and conflicting narratives can distort reality and shake someone's confidence. In those moments, reflection is difficult. Defensiveness is easier, but truth has a way of surfacing over time, even if it arrives more slowly than the lie. Ultimately, the broader issue isn't just about one dispute or one headline, it's about how quickly misinformation can define a person, how power and influence can shape perception, and how important it is to question the first story we hear. Developer Amodi, according to the account presented in a lawsuit. Jennifer Abel says there was never any company policy at Jones Works prohibiting personal use of a work phone. She states that she had been told it was acceptable to use the device for both business and personal matters, which she says is common practice in the public relations industry. Because of that understanding, she claims she had no reason to expect that her employer would later access the contents of the phone, using advanced forensic software, copy its data, and share materials with a third party. A key issue in her case is the distinction between owning a physical device and having legal access to private digital accounts. Abel argues that although the company may have owned the phone itself, that did not grant it the right to access personal email accounts, private text messages linked to her individual cloud account, or a phone number she had used for many years before transferring it onto a company plan. She alleges that the data extraction was conducted without her consent and involved bypassing security protections actions she claims violate California's anti-hacking statute under the Penal Code, which prohibits unauthorized access and copying of digital data. In addition, she has brought a promissory fraud claim, alleging that she was promised the phone would simply be transferred and reset to factory settings once she provided her passcode, rather than forensically examined. The lawsuit also addresses public criticism suggesting she should have deleted personal materials or avoided using a work device for private matters. Her position is that she relied on her employer's explicit approval and therefore did not anticipate any privacy breach. The dispute escalated further when materials obtained from the phone were reportedly shared beyond the company. According to the allegations, this included extensive message threads and communications spanning more than a year. Another major controversy tied to the broader conflict involves disputes over public narratives surrounding the film adaptation of It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. Tensions reportedly arose between Hoover and Justin Baldoni amid backlash, media coverage, and disagreements about creative decisions, including changes to the film's ending. In messages that have circulated publicly, Hoover expressed frustration about feeling isolated during online criticism and concern that public statements were fueling negativity. She also referenced disagreements over the script process, promotional efforts, charitable donations related to domestic violence causes, and social media messaging. These overlapping disputes, legal, professional, and reputational, highlight how conflicts in high-profile projects can quickly expand beyond private disagreements into public battles involving media strategy, leaked communications, and competing narratives. At the center are complex questions about digital privacy, employer authority over workplace devices, creative control and adaptations, and the powerful role public platforms play in shaping perception long before courts or formal investigations resolve the facts. It's understandable that people find parts of this a situation confusing or contradictory. From one perspective, the frustration over how a charitable donation would be structured can seem surprising. especially if the amounts involved were relatively small compared to overall compensation. However, in entertainment and publishing deals, donations tied to projects are often shaped by legal, contractual, or tax considerations, which can limit how funds are distributed or in whose name they're made. What may look personal on the surface can sometimes come down to structural or legal constraints. There were also claims that donations were ultimately made, but disagreements centered on attribution, specifically whether they could be made in the author's name versus through the production entity. That distinction appears to have fueled part of the tension. At the same time, accusations about media involvement went in multiple directions. While concerns were raised about negative press and back-and-forth articles, reports indicated that individuals on different sides may have communicated with outlets such as the Daily Mail or TMZ. That makes the public narrative more complicated, because once multiple parties are engaging with media, it becomes harder to frame the situation as entirely one-sided. The text exchange you referenced shows an attempt by Justin Baldoni to respond point by point. In his message, he denied contributing to negative press, emphasized that he valued the collaboration, and referenced earlier communications such as sharing the script before a fan reading and respecting boundaries around the proposed documentary. He also explained that the coffee table book donation structure was described to him as a legal requirement rather than a demand, acknowledged venting frustrations during production, and apologized if placed an unfair emotional burden on their friendship, while expressing a desire to repair the relationship. Colleen Hoover's reply, as described, appears more restrained but firm. She clarified that her earlier comment about the script was a mistype and reiterated that she loved the script and supported the film publicly. However, she distinguished between public support and private concerns, saying her issues stemmed from personal experiences and communications that followed. She pushed back on the characterization of certain exchanges as harmless venting, suggesting that repeated blame shifting over issues like the tattoo felt misleading to her. She also indicated she didn't want to continue debating via text and planned to step back for a while. What stands out in this exchange is less about who is right, and more about how differently the same series of events can be interpreted by the people involved. One side frames actions as legal compliance and emotional venting. The other frames them as misrepresentation and attempts to shift blame. When private frustrations spill into public view, especially in a high-profile adaptation like It Ends With You, those differences become amplified. Ultimately, without full context of contracts, timelines, and complete communications, observers are left piecing together narratives from partial information. Situations like this often reflect a breakdown in trust more than a single explosive incident, with small grievances accumulating until both sides feel misunderstood or misrepresented.
This part of the situation shows how personal dynamics, misunderstandings, and professional pressures collided during the production and promotion of the film. The person writing expresses feeling unsupported, without a PR team, and unsure how to respond to recent events. They are particularly concerned about younger or less experienced team members like Isabella and Alex being left without guidance, therapy resources, or emotional support during the promotional tour, which underscores the intensity and pressure of high-profile projects. The account highlights disagreements over venting and communication. In film productions, venting is often a way to process stress and navigate creative differences. In this case, one party interpreted venting as a deliberate attempt to turn someone against another Blake, while the other insists it was simply personal frustration. This misinterpretation seems to have fueled tensions and contributed to a breakdown in trust. The messages also reveal frustrations about past misunderstandings, like the tattoo issue and the way credit or praise was shared publicly. The writer acknowledges mistakes, e.g., misblaming Blake for the tattoo, but emphasizes that their venting was never intended to harm anyone. Meanwhile, they describe feeling excluded and isolated, handling press alone, missing out on premiere events, and being separated from the cast and after-party, which amplified feelings of betrayal. Ultimately, the writer frames the conflict as a combination of miscommunication, personal grievances, and professional pressure, rather than a calculated campaign to harm anyone. They note that these conflicts deeply affected personal relationships and the emotional well-being of everyone involved, making the situation not just about the film itself, but also about trust, friendship, and accountability. It underscores how quickly creative projects can escalate into personal and public conflicts when communication breaks down and perceptions diverge. Here's a clear summary of what's being described in this last section. The central point is that much of the narrative about a supposed smear campaign was misleading. According to the texts and internal communications from Jones' works, Justin Baldoni wasn't orchestrating attacks, he was largely responding to public commentary and navigating media coverage. Exchanges included discussions about TikTok posts, possible fan videos, headlines being circulated, and how to manage media narratives. Internal messages repeatedly emphasized avoiding escalation, keeping positive energy, and not engaging in retaliation advice that was omitted in selective reports, including some coverage in the New York Times. Specific examples included text confirmations, that no bots were being used to defend him online. Contrary to accusations of manipulation, communications also show attempts to remain professional and constructive, even when frustrations arose. Meanwhile, Colleen Hoover's own messages expressed that she wanted no further involvement with anyone on the project, including Blake, while also maintaining that she was proud of the film. Despite this context, a lawsuit was filed that, according to this perspective, ignored or excluded these clarifying messages. The text argues that the evidence indicates Blake Lively's legal action was motivated by revenge rather than factual wrongdoing, and that many people involved, Justin, Jennifer, Melissa, and others were unfairly drawn into public scrutiny and legal conflict while trying to defend themselves. Overall, this paints a picture of a situation where selective reporting, omitted evidence, and misinterpretations escalated tensions, creating a narrative in the media that didn't fully reflect the internal communications or intentions of those involved. The final commentary encourages viewers to critically consider the evidence and the motivations behind the lawsuit, rather than accepting the headline version of events.